Hello, and welcome back to another episode of the Collective Clicks podcast. This is your host, Brandon Bateman, and today I'm going to be joined by Garrett, Cragun. We're going to talk all about the things that are changing in the world of online marketing and how that's likely to affect the real estate investing industry over the next 5 to 10 years. This is all about future-proofing your business, understanding where the industry is going, and we're going to talk about a lot of nerdy stuff, so I hope you like it. How you doing, Garrett?
Doing good. How are you?
Hey, doing awesome. Thank you. I'm excited about our topic today. We're going to talk all about what's changing in the world of search. I think, and really in the world of marketing in general online for motivated seller lead gen. And so much of this kind of follows the path of what's happening just online in general. Seems like in a lot of ways what seems to happen in this industry is just whatever happened to other industries just 5 years later. So we'll talk about some of that stuff. And I'm super excited to dig into it.
Let's do it. Yeah, I think it's always fun talking about the future and what's going to change and what we think will, go down. That's always exciting. So let's do it.
Yeah, so this is a little bit of a nerdy episode. If you're not nerdy about digital ads, probably not for you. That's my disclaimer. So you can't hate me if this is too boring. Garrett and I basically put together a list of things that we think are going to change. These are opinions only. We cannot predict the behaviors of large corporations, although they're pretty predictable. So let's talk about some of the stuff that's going to happen. Whether it happens in 1 year or happens in 5 years or 10 years, some of that is unknown, but it likely will happen. The first one that we mentioned is match types for keywords within search marketing. Do you want to expand on that a little bit, Garrett, and what that means?
Yeah. So over the last couple of years, Google's been pushing advertisers to kind of broaden their targeting with keywords to more intent-based keywords, going broad and going away from exact match and phrase match keywords, which historically have been kind of the expert marketer's best friend, is keeping the keyword super tight, super focused on just exactly what they want to bid on. But over time, Google has pushed people to go broader and broader. And what I think will happen is over the next year or two, they're going to just wipe out the option of going phrase and exact match and just make everyone go broad in the interest of, optimal performance. But in
They
reality,
say.
they just want to sell their less valuable inventory. So it's going to depend on the advertiser to, still target their ideal persona without having the crutch of match types to do it for them.
Yeah, understandable. And to expand on this a little bit, just for anybody's listening that might not really know what match types are, this is kind of the way that you communicate to Google what inventory you want and what inventory you don't want when it comes to search engine marketing. So, a lot of people know that keywords exist, right? They understand I want to bid on X keyword or Y keyword. But what a lot of people don't realize is, like, where do you draw the lines of what fits to that keyword or not? A good example of this could be like, we buy houses, right? Maybe you're bidding to that keyword. Back in the day, you would try to bid towards we buy houses, and what would happen is you get we buy houses when someone searches that, right? It was kind of simple. Nowadays, maybe you try to communicate that to Google, and then Google gives you something like buy houses is the actual term that someone searched, which we know as investors has a very different meaning than we buy houses, right? But Google is kind of just trying to expand the meaning of that, because now your single keyword can match just so much of their inventory instead of just a smaller sliver of that inventory, which is good in some ways and bad in other ways. Like, I know that you and I, Garrett, have both seen our clients getting some search terms recently that are really fascinating, but also really high quality. I wish I could think of an example right now, but there's a massive number of Google searches every day that have never been searched in the history of Google, even today. And some of those are really valuable to you. So it's good to have an algorithm that kind of sees, well, this is close enough to what we want. But Google has just been expanding and expanding the definition of what that means to the point that it hardly means anything anymore. To say that you want this keyword. I know there was an update. What was it? June, July? There's an update in how Google was viewing a specific match type of a keyword. And I knew it threw a lot of advertisers in this industry for a loop. In our case, we had such a strong negative keyword list that it didn't really create any issues. But for somebody that wasn't expecting that type of change, you thought you were getting some type of inventory, and then you get something completely different that's way lower quality.
Yeah, and I think it kind of just speaks to the principle of you can't be too like married to any particular strategy that Google is eventually going to take away, because they're always going to, I mean, what I think is they're always going to shift away from advertiser control towards platform control. And so it's so important that you are like working with Google, like we always talk about, where like if you fight Google, they're gonna always win. So it's important that your tactics kind of follow the flow of innovation that's happening on the platforms.
Yeah, totally agreed. And actually along that same vein, another thing that Google's been making a lot of moves on recently is bidding. And this is a world, I mean, we've talked about bidding over and over again on this podcast. Obviously, like I'm convinced that if an advertiser does nothing right except for their bidding, they can do pretty well. Because you could just, like, for example, you could have every keyword in the world, including a billion of them that aren't actually valuable for your business. You could have them and be targeting them. But if you pay the right price for them, which would be like an infinitesimally small number for most of those keywords, then you'll still win, right? Bidding is like the magic that fixes most problems that you could have in Google Ads. But they've been kind of shifting from a very manually controlled bidding, where it used to be like, I have this exact match keyword and I want to pay this exact price per click for it, or whatever the case is. This is why it's called pay per click marketing, right? It's like that's how Google started, right? Once upon a time, they allowed people to just buy up inventory on the search pages, and then they realized they could make a lot more money by charging per click on those pages and having things be really relevant. And they went that path. And advertisers have been trying to game the system for the longest time, just trying to figure out how to make it as efficient as possible. But Google keeps on moving towards these like more automated strategies instead of just a cost per click bidding system.
Yep, and there are a lot of people that are still very anti auto bidding, right? Like there's this fear of like, if I can't, like dictate the exact amount that I'm going to bid, then I'm going to overpay, and Google's going to take away my, they're going to overcharge me, and I'll waste money. But the it's my belief that by using all of the data that Google has available that we don't have available, you're going to be much more agile in bidding based on the individual making the search, not just what they're searching. And so I think it's smart at this point to start to shift to more of an auto bidding strategy, away from manual, because one, it's probably going away. Two, it's it when done properly, auto bidding drives better results at scale than manual can, in my opinion.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. And I'm gonna like stereotype in a way that's probably very offensive to a large number of people. But we
Excellent.
can do that, right? It's free speech,
Free
right?
country.
Yep. Gotta love America. So, blanket statement, do you agree or disagree? Pretty much everybody I know that's like way into manual bidding, they fall into one or two categories. They're like somebody who's been doing this for a long time. They have a lot of experience with Google Ads. So they're like 10, 15, 20 years into this kind of marketing that just hasn't adapted. Or they're an advertiser that works with like really small clients for the most part that just overall don't have a lot of data. Everybody I know that's way into manual bidding is in like one of those situations, versus like all the people I know and trust that are managing budgets for some of the biggest companies in America that are spending a ton of money on channels like PPC. You ask them about manual bidding, they're like, is that still a thing? Does anybody do that still? And then there's this like a group of hardcore people that are like, you need SCAGs and manual bidding, that are like a decade in the past, or they just work with like, because there is a situation, if an account has like no data, manual bidding will work better. And if you have a lot of data, then auto bidding will work better. And then everything in between, there's kind of like that point where you pass that threshold. And that threshold has just been going down and down and down over time as the auto bidding gets even smarter. But anyways, agree or disagree? Am I insulting too much of the world with that statement, or is it right on?
I had a much more offensive way to describe them than you did. I was gonna say they're dinosaurs, but I think they're they're more seasoned advertisers who have been burned before by Google. They're just jaded, you know. They've been hurt, and so makes sense. I think you're right. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and I think it's really easy to be that way in any like fast evolving technology industry, right? Like you could easily say you use like a language model 5 years ago and it was horrible, so you're not going to use a language model ever again. But ChatGPT is pretty good. I'm not saying
Yeah.
it can like work for everything you're ever going to do, but like that's like language models are a great example of how far technology has come. And okay, I'm going to I don't know if I can I don't know how much time I'm supposed to spend on this soapbox. But here's the thing that Google's doing basically. They want you to use their technology. They are limiting the amount of data that you can access. So let's just say you're so cocky that you believe that you're some superhuman that's actually smarter at math than computers are, which I already think is just a dumb path to go around. Let's just say that's true. And then let's just say, in addition to that, the computer has thousands of data points and you have like dozens of data points because Google knows that there's some smart people out there. So what they like to do is just kick them in the kneecaps so they don't have all the information that they once had. So now it's even harder to compete with Google, right? Because we're just going to shield you from all this data. And that's kind of what's happening with like manual bidding versus auto bidding. Like if I'm so cocky to assume that I can bid better than Google can, then in addition to that, Google's going to give me just these little slivers of data. They don't even give you all the search term data anymore. And they're going to allow me to make decisions based on that. Meanwhile, their models have tens of thousands of data points per user that they're using to optimize, and I'm supposed to outperform Google.
Yep.
It's just it's super impractical, and it's already we've been testing manual bidding versus auto bidding for our clients, and rarely can we make manual bidding work better. And it should be only going further that direction as these algorithms get even smarter.
Yeah. This is a terrible analogy, but I'm gonna make it because it made me laugh as I thought about it. Um, have you ever seen the movie Monty Python and the Holy Grail?
Unfortunately, I think I did once upon a time.
There's a scene in there where there's a knight that will not stop fighting even as he gets all of his limbs chopped off until
Oh yeah.
he's just a stump and he's still threatening to bite their like limbs off. That's kind of how this is, right? Like over time, Google is just taking away one arm, a different arm, and they're still saying I can still do manual bidding. And eventually, it's like I probably need to just keep my limbs and follow where it's going and find ways to maximize what's happening. I think that's kind of what's happening. Is like is Google's gonna win that fight, and so it's all about like finding ways to make them your ally and not an enemy that you're always fighting against.
Yeah, and all these people that are so hardcore about manual bidding, in my experience, they haven't tried these strategies that make Google your ally, right? So it's like yeah, I tried the auto bidding, it didn't work, but then they didn't do it right. And they didn't give Google the right data and all that stuff. And the same could be said for manual bidding, right? There's a big difference between someone who's really talented at manual bidding and somebody that does it based on feel or whatever the case is. But yeah, I think it's undeniably going a certain direction. And if it's not going that direction naturally, and if there still are people out there that are smarter than Google, then Google's just going to limit their data until they're dumber than Google. And the
Exactly.
algorithms are just going to get smarter and smarter, right? So if we're talking about future proofing, that has to be a piece of your strategy. It's like text messaging for like getting motivated sellers. Am I saying it doesn't work? No, but like anytime you're doing something that many of the people that you rely on to make that happen don't want you to be doing that. For example, carriers who have and customers of theirs that don't actually want to be getting these text messages and stuff, you're living on borrowed time in that kind
Mhm.
of circumstance. Like it will end. The question is when will it end and how will it end? But you don't like for something to work and work long term, everybody that uses the system needs to be bought into it. And if Google's not bought into manual bidding, they will destroy it. And I'm convinced it's not even going to be an option in a few years.
Oh yeah, be gone. Absolutely.
Yeah. All right. Probably went a little bit too deep into that. Let's talk about what would you say if let's just say I'm somebody and I tell you, well, motivated sellers don't go to Google. None of the sellers that I work with even have computers. They don't know how to use Google. What would you say to that?
Yeah, I think what I would say is like if they aren't getting their information from Google, where are they getting it from? First of all, and even if there are those people that aren't getting it from Google, I would still say that the best intent to target sellers is still going to be on Google.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we have clear evidence that there are a lot of people doing it, right? Because we have, I mean, we can't like make up leads and give them to our clients and have our clients close them into deals. We could make up leads, but they
It would
wouldn't close into deals. They
yeah.
wouldn't end up in revenue unless we were willing to lose a lot of money in the process of making this happen, right? So there's people there. Yeah, but it's interesting to see like the trend that's been happening. There have been pretty steady increases in search volume, kind of regardless of the market conditions. So you just kind of have to picture like a decade out into the future, what does your motivated seller look like? And chances are they are more tech savvy, right? Because they are people who are 10 years younger right now who will then grow into that. And then the world of the technology will evolve and it will have more time and all that kind of stuff. So I think we're actually in a really unique industry where most of the online potential hasn't been unlocked yet. And this is the opposite. Like, I don't know of any industry, literally don't know of any industry where offline channels are bigger than online channels, except for this real estate industry. You
Yep.
go to any other industry I've ever been in, it's like online's the main thing, and maybe they're going to like try some direct mail or they're going to be doing some outbound or whatever the case is. Versus this industry is just flip flopped. And every time I talk to somebody outside of this industry, they're just like mind blown that people like still send direct mail or something. I know, of course, we all have mailboxes. We all know there's companies out there doing it. Usually they're dinosaur companies that have been around for a long time, but I think it's a massive, massive opportunity, even just being online, having an online presence as that's growing so quick, because the number of motivated sellers that don't know how to use computers and aren't going to use a search engine to directly influence their behavior is just going down and down. And the number that are actually using search engines, like the rest of the world, is going up. This is one of those trends that very clearly follows the rest of the world just 5 to 10 years later, just based on the age of the average seller.
Yeah, I mean, I think easy way to put it is like, if you think that like online marketing is big now, wait until the like people now that are in their 50s and 60s end up being our new audience for sellers, and they actually know how to change their browser from Bing to Google, and they know how to search on Google without having it be a full sentence. Like, if, if it's big now with our current demographic of boomers and baby boomers, it's going to only be that much bigger when the audience is actually overwhelmingly tech knowledgeable, if not savvy.
Yeah, totally agreed. Let's talk about a hot topic right now, which is privacy.
Mm-hmm.
This is something where there's been a fun evolution, right? It kind of started out as like, hey, look, there's this cool product called Facebook, for example, and I can use this product and it's free, right? So the world of free products like started existing kind of recently. Like it wasn't normal after that. And then slowly people start to realize, well, if you don't have to pay for the product, then you probably are the product. And
Mm-hmm.
that's how these companies function. And people start to get uneasy about the data. And then we have the whole Cambridge Analytica scandal happen with Facebook. And now it feels like every other day we're learning about another situation where people from Google or Facebook are talking to government officials trying to communicate these things that those old government officials cannot figure out what they're saying. And everybody's trying to figure out like, then we have
What's happening?
GDPR and like, and then we have Apple who's like advocating for the consumer and saying like you need privacy, but I think with somewhat sketchy intentions. And like, so all this stuff layers together. It's a wild world out there. Where does that go and how does it affect online advertising?
I think, I mean, there's going to be a like slow shift away from the the confidence in data and the like one-to-one match of what's happening offline versus what
Mm-hmm.
we can see online, becoming a bigger and bigger gap. And so it's going to be a lot harder to like say like definitively this is the revenue that I got from this channel. This person came from this channel. Like, as the as the platforms, as the government, as you know, the the tech devices slowly take away that insight, it's going to be that much harder to use those platforms that inherently are harder to track, like paid social, like Facebook, like YouTube.
Hmm. I definitely see a shift from social to search happening. You know what a great example of it is, if you ever looked into DuckDuckGo or seen some of their advertising and stuff, they're basically like the privacy centric search engine,
Mm-hmm.
but they still sell ads. What else do you know that's privacy centric and still sells ads? The only things I know of like that are search engines. And the reason being, there's a lot of value in what somebody searched, even without all the other data. Like if you look at the difference between what Google's algorithm does and what Facebook's algorithm does, Facebook's looking at like your credit card history and like your age and gender and what kind of insurance you have and your home and your family and what websites you visit and all that stuff. And you know what? Google looks at a lot of that stuff too, but they also look at what did you just search on Google? And that's the biggest piece of the algorithm, right? Is what is the intent associated with that? You could remove all that other stuff and just have the intent piece of what did you type into the search engine, and you still have a wildly valuable advertising method. Whereas on Facebook, you wipe all that stuff out and you're basically stuck with TV advertising, right? Someone's watching this channel, so we're going to show them this ad. So I think that's super interesting because the targetability of Google, even with very intense potential privacy regulations, I think the targetability on search engines will remain really high. Whereas with all other platforms, it will decrease pretty significantly.
Yep. Um, I agree that marketing will shift more bottom funnel and less top funnel in this industry,
That's a great
because
point.
bottom funnel is going to be increasingly more effective. And I think in like other spaces, people could make both work still, right? But like with Facebook already being difficult to target a like high quality seller as it is, when that shifts, it's going to be even more important to reach them on the platform search, where you can have a better chance of reaching the right kind of person.
Yeah, the companies advertising on Facebook will be more and more ubiquitous, right? It's not going to work for like niche marketing. It's going to be like the cell phone companies or the e-commerce companies with a really ubiquitous product or insurance or the kind of stuff you see on TV. Because like anybody watching could be into this, right?
Yeah.
And you can't have a super
Beer.
niche product. Yeah, beer. Yeah. Well, they still need to target
I
21
don't
plus, but
bacon.
yeah.
That's true. Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, they didn't with TV, right? So
Yeah.
there's going to have to be some. It's interesting how some of these laws kind of collide with each other. Let's talk about what Apple's doing in this whole thing, because Apple is like manufacturing problems essentially for digital marketers, and they have been for some time, and they have the pull to be able to pull this off just with how many devices are Apple devices. And I think there's something to be said for the potential lifetime value they have of a user as they break more and more into the advertising world. But what do you think about like the moves that Apple's been making, and what that means for like privacy and what that means for search marketing?
As a person with like ethics, it's pretty rough and not great. But as a like marketer, it's brilliant because they've spun the narrative of making their biggest competition, Amazon, Google, Facebook, as these like privacy ignoring monster capitalists. And then they, Apple, are this like consumer centric, we respect your data, unlike them. But really all they've done is they've just kneecapped all of their competition and built this walled garden where only they now have access to all of your data. And I'm convinced that in the next, I don't know, 5 years max, they're going to launch their own search platform and use all of the data that they only have now, and just build an ecosystem that's gonna just blow Facebook and Google out of the water. That's my theory, and like it's obvious and it's brilliant, and I think it's just a matter of when, not if, that happens.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you think of just the little things that contribute to this, like just like a few facts, right? Like we know that Google just paid Samsung $10 billion last year to make their browser, or to make their I don't know if it was for the search or if it was for the Chrome browser, a default
Hmm.
on Samsung phones. Or think about like what Apple did recently, like on Safari. What do? Do you still go to google.com and then on google.com search for things? No, they made it like quote unquote easier, right? Because you just go to the address bar and you just type in your Google search, and then that happens, right? I'm sure they have some type of deal with Google there, but what just happens if one day that's Apple search instead of Google search? And hardly anybody knows the difference. And then you search for a way to sell your house fast, and then you click on something, and then that advertiser pays Apple $30. Then it gets really interesting, right? Is the game of Apple to sell $1,000 phones? Like, yes, maybe, but for each $1,000 phone you sell, how many times is that person going to click on search ads? And how much money are they going to get from advertisers for that? Like, I see a world where Apple could make more money from advertising than they do from their hardware, which would be insane.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, it gives them a brand new way to monetize their market share, and at the same time, their biggest competition. Like
Mm-hmm.
it's crazy. It's brilliant.
Yeah, yeah, it's kind of brilliant. So I don't know how the world will change of like where how search marketing is happening, but it seems like there's a reasonable chance that another search engine like Apple, for example, could have a significant market share. And what that means is we have to start advertising on those search engines as well, right? Which theoretically doesn't change the game that much. You just have to be on top of it. And theoretically, there would be a lot of value there, and it would diminish the value of Google over time, although it would be a similar product.
Yeah, I think like you're saying, the safe play is to just diversify. Have ads on all of those platforms. So anyway, as an investor, get on Google or on Apple for sure, because it's going to be a big player sooner than later.
Yeah, I think there's one last thing I wanted to touch on, and it has to do with kind of like the incentives of search engines, and really what's trying to happen. Um, and this is the last thing that I think will majorly change. It seems like Google kind of has it out for agencies. Like they don't love agencies. I don't know if it's because of the 15% agencies charge or something that Google thinks that they could be getting on their side, or if it's because they think that the agencies aren't doing quality work, or I don't know what the issue is, but it seems to me like basically there's people who fall in two camps of thought, and I think both of them are flawed. The first one is Google is your ally. What they want is for you to have a high return on investment, so you're going to spend more money, and you should just trust them and go with them. The second school of thought is Google wants to take all of your money, and they don't care if you get a return. I think the reality of the situation is that Google cares about neither of those. What they care about is a level playing field. Because if all advertisers are on the same playing field, then there's a low barrier to entry, more inventory can be bought, and then they can really like push to maximize the amount of money spent. So Google doesn't really care that advertiser one does way Google doesn't want advertiser one to do way better than advertiser two. Google wants them both to do equally well and have an exactly even playing field, so that theoretically they both spend as much money as they could versus advertiser two getting out of the game because advertiser one's more savvy than they are, right? And that's why they're doing like this bidding stuff. That's why they're doing this match type stuff. What do you think about that, and how do you think that affects the path? And how do agencies fit into this? Like, what is the whole like? If we were to ask the question in 5 years of you're doing Google ads, what do you need to win on the highest level possible? What is the answer at that point? Do you just ask your AI assistant to run you some Google ads and it works? Or is are you hiring agencies? What kind of strategies are you using?
Yeah, the goal, like you said, that I see is to make there be as few levers as possible and for a like marketer to pull in Google Ads. On the end of the like smaller like business, it's to make it simpler. On the end of the large business, it's to maximize the inventory that can be sold, and to like maximize the amount that Google can charge like per click, right? And so the method is the same, but the goal is different. And I think the path to winning is what we always preach, which is feeding good data, using the algorithms to your advantage, and constantly testing new things, especially the things that Google is rolling out, because odds are they're gonna keep those things in place, and the person that learns how to make those work is going to be the person that wins.
Yeah, that's super fair to say. I see a world, right? If this is all becoming algorithmic, it really just comes down to whoever has the most data wins. If you have more data, you can have a better informed strategy. You can keep the algorithm more informed, right? This isn't like the game's becoming less and less about can I come up with a better keyword list than you can come up with. We all have the same keyword list, right? It's all going to target the same stuff. We all know how to make good landing pages and stuff, although that's going to matter, right? How effectively you can do those things. What it really comes down to is who has more data. That's why I'm still like, even in the situation that we're in with online advertising right now, I'm optimistic about Bateman Collective. And the reason is because of what we do with data aggregation. If our clients can come together and share data and feed that data to Google in bulk, then we have the ability to act like we're larger advertisers than we actually are, which does create an unlevel playing field compared to anybody else who is trying to do any AI driven or automation driven strategies that just doesn't have as much data. So I definitely think there's a world where that continues to have a lot of value because Google doesn't have your data about what your customers do. That's the one thing that they'll probably never have consistently, especially when it comes from offline sources. So if you can have the biggest database of that kind of information, then you have the one thing that Google doesn't have that they need to know in order to understand how to optimize your account. If you can nail that, I think you can nail results for a long, long time until Google figures something out that I can't even foresee at this moment.
Yep. No, yeah, that's the key, right? Is to get as much data as as quality as possible, and the person that gets there is going to win every time, and that's going to be even more the case as Google takes away those levers that give the illusion of influence and control.
Yeah, totally agreed. So sorry if this episode was a little bit out there. You guys can hold us accountable in 5 years, see if we're right or not. These are educated guesses, and I'm sure I'll look back and think I was an idiot, but also right about some things. But anyways, I'm grateful for all of you that have listened here to this episode. If you find this content valuable, please leave a review. Please share this podcast with anybody else that you think could benefit from this. I think the real estate investing industry as a whole needs a lot more people that are a lot more savvy with internet marketing, with the whole direction that everything's going. And I will see you next week.